Test. Hey, Steve, nice to see you.
Laura has to tell you she's gonna be on Zoom tonight.
I look forward to seeing her.
It's too foggy on the broad neck to go out.
Hey, Mark, good to see you. It's going to be an interesting one today. Rob Kahana, he's a good one.
So I need the materials.
Yep, right here.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of it, or did you make a copy or no? Kahana.
I didn't. I
Okay, cool.
forgot.
I don't have a working printer, so I even though I can access it. I don't know. Can't print.
It's all good.
I'll go in the library.
It's all good. You come here, I make copies for you.
Yeah, it's good.
Oof. How you been?
Pretty good.
Good, glad to hear.
How's your son doing in Israel? Is
Fine.
everything okay?
Well, I mean, I say fine because what you're asking about, he's fine. He's bored.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah.
He
Life
is
on the ground, right?
He is so bored because you can't go too far away from the.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's supposed to come out or not.
What is?
His lights.
Oh,
Make sure.
no, thank you, Len. It's just boring for him. He's in the shelter the whole time and, we're in and out of the shelters and you can't go too far from a shelter and all the restaurants and stores are closed for that reason, and and he's between semesters and all of his classmates or the people who are in his program are, because he's staying for 2 semesters, everyone else usually does 1 semester. And it's between semesters, so they're home and haven't gotten there yet, and now can't get there.
Right.
And so the point is, and he's just kind of like down because he's thinking, he's just going to be bored, right? So he's suffering, but not suffering the way that I want you to, not the way you imagine the person in Tel Aviv suffering. Right?
He's just there for a semester.
Year.
For a full
He's
year?
been there since,
Okay.
yeah.
But you're his dad, so you have a different viewpoint.
I have confidence. I know he's
You
fine.
know, I understand that, I get that from you, but still, I don't know.
I think he's fine. I know he's fine. It's just, I just feel bad for him. I mean, and I was on the phone with him today. I'm like, do you want to come home? I know they're starting to like get planes out, you know, people who want to, you know, when America said you got to leave, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe, you know, if you want to come home, we can get you home. And he's like, no, because he's having a great time. Right? He loves it. He's just, you know.
Is he there with kids from his school?
No, because Maryland, I'm going to say this in in the kindest way I can. They are inhaling with great force, and it's creating suction. They're sucking. See, what happened was that they don't do the program because over the last few years, the insurance or something, and so they don't let the program go. And so he has to drop out or take a leave of absence from school and enroll at Tel Aviv University as a student.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
That is
Because they don't
ridiculous.
want to have, you know, the insurance, whatever. So it's a real frustration for us. There's no question about it. But he's doing good. And really, he's living his best life over there. And if more of his friends were around, he would be actually perfectly fine hanging out in shelters. It's just
right.
when you got to go in a shelter and you don't know anybody, you're just sitting around, and you know, it's like, again, you can meet people, and he is, but the point is that they're not his like buds or whatever. And so,
Yeah.
you know, and fortunately, the last couple days haven't been a problem. But the first few days, he was getting woken up throughout the night, every hour and a half or 2 hours. I mean, can you imagine? It's like, you know what it's like? It's like having a baby,
Yeah.
It's like,
right?
yeah.
And it's like, and that, you know, that infant, the first 10
Right.
weeks of that, you know, and then it's like you just can't go to sleep, and you're just dying to go to sleep, and you just can't, right? And that's what's happening in the damn shit, right? So it's just like, poor guy.
We had two boys 15 months apart, so we had two babies in the house for a little while.
Right. Oh, well, we had our first and second were 15 months apart,
15
and then the
months
other
apart, then you
ones
know.
after that were two. Each one was then 2 years apart. So we did the exact same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, again, I'm giving you the long answer to the question, and I could have just said everything is fine. Instead, I chose to be with this and say, no, he's suffering.
I can't believe Maryland doesn't have a program right now.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Well, I
They have a
mean,
lot of Jews at Maryland.
oh, I know they do. I know they do. Yeah, so yeah, it's just been disappointing that they, you know, and so no, very few, yeah. I mean, if anyone from Maryland is there, they're doing it on their own, and the truth is that, but how do I put this? So, and the kids who are like the religious Jews and stuff like that, you know, so maybe they're kind of doing the same thing that Sammy is, but they're going to Jerusalem. And he's in Tel Aviv. So anyone who would be going to Tel Aviv University is not going. Only like the, you know,
Right.
maybe the religious are still trying to go, and it's whatever, it's fine. Hey, Deb, just asking, did you print out the document?
I'm not sure if I have the right thing.
I sent it yesterday.
I've got this Pirkei Avot
Well, that's good.
5.
That's not going to help much today.
Okay, I have this one.
Does one say Rav Kahana at the top?
No.
That was what I sent yesterday.
Okay, no, I didn't do it.
I mean,
I can do it right now. I've got Haya.
nope, we're done with that.
Okay.
We're just working with Rav Kahana. I mean, let me see if I can also just find it here and at least, how do I do this?
I can print it out.
All right, so
Printer right here.
great.
Let me.
Like I said, I sent it in the classroom yesterday.
What's that?
I sent it in the classroom yesterday. How do I do this?
I should have got an email.
Charles Larner that's so funny. How did he? Oh, maybe yeah, sent out an email, copy link. How about this? And then put it in, and I can put
What's
it,
the name on the email that I could,
maybe it says Google Classroom or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. Here, I'm also but look what I'm doing here. I'm gonna put it, if I can, Control, is it V? Yeah. So it's there in the chat. I just put it in the chat.
okay.
It says new announcement, hello, friends.
Right.
Yeah, I just found it too.
Okay, Rav Kahana.
Yep. I try to send it to you guys on the day before. Sometimes if I don't get, if I was kind of busy on the Monday, I try to prepare on Mondays for this class. And so I put together our document, on Mondays. But sometimes I don't get around to it till Tuesdays. And if so, there it is. But for now, doing best.
Okay.
Anyway.
All
So-
right, it's printing right now.
Great.
Yeah, I got a printer right in my.
Hi, Laura. Do you have a copy of the document? Rob?
Bring it up now.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay, it's coming.
Yep, we're doing Rav Kahana.
Yep, it's kind of a fun one too. Not so much, I thought there was gonna be more material because I feel like I've heard him so much, but not as much material as I had thought, but what there is, it's fun. Ned, do you have a copy of the material?
I don't, but I'm just going to listen since I'm only in chapter 2. I'm doing this daily reading called Soul Purpose.
Well, it doesn't
Which-
matter, I mean, the point is that I just put it in the chat for you, Ned, if you wanna print it up or put it, it's in the chat of the Zoom.
Oh, okay, great. Let me, unfortunately, I don't have a printer, but I will read. You need
So I'll be
access.
reading along with you anyway, but
Okay,
just,
great.
you want it, you got it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Did you
Now I
get,
have no excuse for not doing my homework.
like, did you get the document, I mean, did you connect with the Google Classroom?
It said Zoom link on the email.
I know. I sent you an invite to the Google Classroom last week, but don't worry about it, I just want to, so.
I will, let me look that up. There you are, Rabbi Ari Goldstein.
Yeah, for some reason, Rabbi, it was, well, not for some reason, for natural reasons. I went to go out and we are socked in with fog.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, that's why I didn't drive. I don't drive well at night and it's really,
oh no, I have no
Drive
problem.
my best when it's foggy.
Yeah,
How do you tell me your name?
Michael
Michael.
Yeah.
Tell me your last name.
Ford.
Michael Ford, good to see you, Michael. Welcome.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Michael, how are you?
can we see who Michael is?
I don't know where to go. Where do we go?
Let's see,
Uh,
say another thing or two.
Hi there. Is
Hey,
it one of those
Michael.
things that's phonetically?
Yeah.
hey, Laura, it's good to see
Oh,
you.
I was going over, there it is.
Oh,
Hey,
Michael.
Hi.
So are there 5 people online? Is that
Yeah, 5 people
everybody?
online, you never know how many are gonna come, and we still have, it's 7:02. Yeah, for some reason, it's a little small, but anyway, how'd you hear about the class?
Well, I moved to the area and I
Right.
looked up the
Wonderful.
synagogue and, yeah, like online on your site.
Fabulous, nice to have you.
Thanks.
My name's Rabbi Ari Goldstein, I'm the rabbi here.
I'm Mark.
This is Mark, that's Steve.
and I'm still Steve.
Still Steve?
And those people, who cares? Bob over here's got a new hip, he'll be here probably in person, maybe in the next couple weeks.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Can't you tell he's got a new hip?
he has sailed through this. It's amazing.
Yep. Laura's there. Charles is on the eastern shore. He's not schlepping over here, that's for sure. Let's start. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kachanu mitzvah v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Adonai our God, for commanding us to busy ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, so since we have an absolute brand new person, and Ned being a relatively brand new person, I will give you a 5-minute introduction, and then we'll get to our text. So for the last few years, we've been doing this class, and one of the things that we do is we've been doing it based upon something called Pirkei Avot, which is a text in Jewish tradition. It is part of what's called the Mishnah, which is a 2nd century text. But whereas the Mishnah is exceedingly legal, the Pirkei Avot is actually deviates, and it's like it's 6 chapters, and it's just a lot of aphorisms and sayings, and they call them ethics or whatever you want to call them. Sometimes it's more than that, and sometimes it's less. It's not quite that, but nonetheless. But Pirkei Avot really means statements of the ancestors. Lots of synagogues do a class on Pirkei Avot, the statements of the ancestors, and so I thought, yeah, sure, let's do it too. However, for me, in order to kind of make it a little bit more interesting, what we decided to do is study the person who made the statement and focus on that even more than the statement itself. Now, we've done 4 chapters, and we've entered chapter 5, and in chapter 5, there are fewer attributions. And so because there are fewer attributions, I went off script a little bit, and I just started grabbing sages left and right, and we would just kind of continue the model, even though the actual sage wasn't connected to the statement itself. Now, so that's the right one. Okay, so now just to give you a sense, the Mishnah is the 2nd century text. The Talmud is as late as 6th century text, but and up until now, or for the most part, we have been studying sages who lived around between, let's say, 60 CE and 200 CE. They are what's referred to as the Tanaim, the early initial sages, and now we're going to be inserting a number of what's called Amoraim, which are the later sages. The later sages being, so you have the Tanaim, who were at the time of the Mishnah, 2nd century, and they made a lot of statements and had a lot of thoughts and had a lot of experiences. And then the Amoraim comment on what those Tanaim said. So the Talmud is like a conversation through the generations, because you've got the Tanaim doing something or saying something, and then the Amoraim discussing it and then elaborating on it. Today we're going to study Rav Kahana, and maybe also one of the Pirkei Avot. The one we're on right now is 4, 5-4. Maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. But we're going to study Rav Kahana. Now, Rav Kahana is, by the way, Michael, before I forget, if you'd like, if you give me your email address, I will invite you to the Google Classroom, and that Google Classroom, I send out the text and the document, that we're going to use ahead of time, so you have it ahead of time. So if you tell me your email, I'll just send it to you. MJF ORD 931
@gmail.com.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's get to it. So we're meeting Rav Kahana, and Rav Kahana is this fascinating guy. Interestingly, as I said this, and but I just glossed over, but I'll say it again. So I thought when I was getting ready to prepare for Rav Kahana that I was going to have so many things, so many stories, and I didn't have nearly as many as I thought I was going to have. And the reason why is just because I felt like I kept hearing his name always. I was like, oh, Rav Kahana this and Rav Kahana that. But turns out maybe oftentimes it had to do with like legal things, or he gave his opinion about something, or the handful of stories about him, which we will talk about, are very memorable. And so because they're very memorable, I just kind of like assumed that there was more, but turns out there's not, but we've got plenty of stuff to talk about. So Rav Kahana was born in Babylonia, and he was educated in Babylonia in the school in the town of Sora, which was probably the most renowned school in Babylonia. And he was a student of the extremely well-renowned rabbi named Rav. Rav just means rabbi. And so if you're, in the same way that, remember, we've talked about how that guy Judah Hanasi from Israel, he's just called rabbi. And so he's just called Rav, which means like when you're just called rabbi or Rav without even having your name associated with it, obviously that you're pretty famous, right? And so he studied with this guy named Rav. And by the way, we'll learn about Rav another time. And so he was in the most famous schoolhouse in Babylonia, working as a student under the most famous rabbi named Rav, at the time named Rav. And so we're now at the first text, Shabbat 146b. Now, by the way, Bob, do you have the text? Just asking. Let me hear it. It's in if you want, I can put it in the chat again. Control V.
The problem is I need permission to access the text.
Oh, it doesn't just open like that?
No. It's still in the chat. It's still there.
Yeah.
But they're saying that you need permission to access it? Why? Some people need permission. All right, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll just read and you'll hear. So
I can just listen, it's fine.
No problem. And I sent it in the Google Classroom yesterday, but doesn't matter. Okay.
I don't think I got it.
Got it.
Sorry.
So the text starts this way. Rav happened to come to a certain place. Oh, one last thing. For those, Michael, for you, that is that just to get a good sense of what the Talmud is like, the bold is the actual Talmud text.
Right.
Not bold is either my own editions or something called Safaria's editions.
Okay.
So it just helps explain it. But the reason why I tell you that is to show just how complicated it was for people to read and understand this.
Yeah.
If you're just reading the bold words, imagine just what a challenge it could be.
This is from Safaria?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
But I took it from Safaria, so you obviously know Safaria. I took it from Safaria, but I also added my own stuff to it. Okay, so Rav happened to come to a certain place where there was not enough room for him and his students inside the house, and therefore he went out and sat in a Carmelite. Okay, so what's a Carmelite? So if you live in Israel, then your answer to that question might be a Carmelite is the funicular that goes in Haifa from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain. But that is not what this is, because it goes up Mount Carmel, and it's called the Carmelite, but that's not what this is. A Carmelite, as it means here, is a room that's alongside the original room, but this room is public and not private. So for example, if you live in a dorm at your college and you've got your own dorm room, and then outside there's like this common room that everyone can kind of hang out and gather. That's obviously not the perfect analogy, but imagine that. But the point though is that it's specifically public and not private. And because it is labeled as public, then there's a question. And the question is, can you bring things from one space to another? Even if there's an eruv, can you bring things because this has been labeled public? And so the eruv kind of takes, all areas and makes them kind of one space. But if one thing is specifically labeled as public, can you then unpublic it, is basically the issue. So that's what's going on here. He went out to this Carmelite because it was so crowded in his classroom. They brought him felt clothes by wearing them outside. And he did not sit on them. Now, what are we talking about? So he goes to this other space and he doesn't have a comfortable place to sit. And so what they want to do is bring him like felt cushions for him to sit on, because you want to make your rabbi more comfortable. Been kind of waiting for you guys to bring in felt cushions for me. Nothing, you guys haven't done that at all, but I accept. In any event,
But this room is outside, open to the sky, or is it in
unclear.
the building?
Unclear to me. Unclear. But what they think is, why don't we just wear them outside and they can be like our clothes, and then it will be legal, right? So they brought him felt clothes by wearing them outside, and he did not sit on them, right? One who saw this incident assumed that he refused to sit on them because it is prohibited to move cloths in this manner, meaning that they're not really meant to be worn as clothes. And so we know that you're just trying to come up with a workaround to this rule.
Is this,
However, yeah,
is it prohibited by, somewhere in the Torah?
Yes.
One of the,
on Shabbat, you can't carry things, not in the Torah, but you can't carry things outside your domain, even if but in this case, but again, the issue has to do with is, since they're labeling it a public space, is it therefore not part of what's then legal use within the world of the Eruv? But put that aside for a minute, because that's ultimately not even going to be the issue. So they assume that he refused to sit on them because it's prohibited to move cloths in this manner. However, that is not so, as Rav used to proclaim that it is permitted to move articles made of felt in this manner. So the point is, he refused to sit on these cloths, on these felt cloths, and everyone assumed like, oh yeah, it's because you're not allowed to do that. But actually, according to him, you are allowed to do that. And so they were wrong in the assumption as to why he wasn't sitting on them. And it was in deference. And it was in deference to our rabbis who were there that he didn't sit on it, as he didn't want to sit on a higher and more distinguished surface than they did. So what they're saying is, the Talmud's saying is, well, no, actually, the reason why Rav didn't sit on these cloths was because he didn't want to elevate himself over some of the people who were there that he respected as scholars, even though they were all his students. And who were these rabbis? Rav Kahana and Rav Asi, who were Rav's disciples and colleagues. In other words, so I started with this text, to say he was born and educated in Sura in Babylonia. He was a student of Rav, and he was held in very high esteem by his teacher himself. In fact, we will learn that he was his primary disciple. So the next text comes from Nazir 19a. Now, Nazir is, does anyone know what a Nazir is? Close. So a Nazir is someone, and this is written about in the Torah, is a person who takes on special obligations on themselves that aren't commanded, but they do it as a way of being particularly devout, loyal, and so you take on what's called a Nazirite vow. So a Nazirite vow says you can't cut your hair, you can't drink alcohol, you can't come into contact with a dead person. Who was the most famous Nazirite? There are two famous Nazirites. The most famous, Samson. long hair, no alcohol.
Okay.
Second most famous Nazarite was Samuel. Now, and so this is an entire book of the Talmud dedicated to people who want to make this Nazarite vow, which I think is a completely, I mean, it's like, who does that stuff? But I'm not going to just argue with the Talmud. But the question that's here is that they're discussing, which I didn't present for you, because all it would do was get us mired too deep. And I just wanted to just get to the point. But the question they're dealing with is, if a Nazarite makes his vow while he is in a cemetery, and one of the parts of a Nazarite vow is you can't come into contact or be in the, of a dead person, right? So if a person decides as he's in a cemetery, can he make a Nazarite vow? Or does it nullify itself right there on the spot? You've broken it the very second you made it. And then what happens is, actually, the person leaves the cemetery and comes back to the cemetery is really the question. And turns out that Rav's counterpart from, I think, Pumbedita, no, Nehardia. So I can't remember if it was a Pumbedita. So Rav's counterpart from Nehardia, I have my list of the Babylonian academies and who were the leaders of the Babylonian academies, just as a way of remembering which one's which. Anyway, so Samuel, who is Rav's counterpart at another academy, just made a statement that not only is the Nazarite vow legitimate, but even if you left and had to come back to that cemetery for something, and that one time, you still haven't broken your Nazarite vow. Okay, so Rav Kahana and Rav Asi, remember, they are friends, as you could see. They hung out and they were the two great disciples of Rav. Rav Kahana and Rav Asi said to Rav, "What is the reason you did not explain it to us with these words of Shmuel, as explained above?" And see, so what had happened was, they were discussing this matter, and Rav simply said, yeah, he can go back in, right? And turns out that Shmuel was the real reason why that had happened, and he had kind of elaborated on it a little bit more. And so they asked him, why didn't you explain this law to us with the words of Shmuel, explaining what Shmuel had said? And he said to them, I said to myself that perhaps you do not require that explanation, as I thought it was apparent that this is the proper explanation of the Mishnah. In other words, he said, I trusted that you guys knew what I was talking about. You are my prime students, and I had a feeling you guys knew it, right? So all this was just doing is adding to the academic and scholarly kind of achievements or heights that Kahana had reached. That he was, my guess, by the way, is had Rav Kahana not moved to Israel, and we're going to find out why he moved to Israel in a minute, but had Rav Kahana not moved to Israel, my guess is that he would have been, the chief primary rabbi and teacher of that academy too. But but before we explain why it was that he didn't, why he had to go to Israel, let's now look at the next one, which is one of my favorites, and which my father-in-law of blessed memory, once when I went over to my father-in-law, Hannah's dad, who passed away about, I think 10 years ago, who was my teacher in seminary, and although he taught Aramaic, he knew the Talmud so well, and whenever I would come over, he would just provide me with a new text from the Talmud that he thought was fun to study together, and they always were fun. It was never like, it was always like something funny or gross or whatever, and he just thought it'd be fun. Anyway, so this is one of the classics, and this is such a great one. On a similar note, the Gemara relates that Rav Kahana, again, I learned this with my father-in-law, so I always thought that there's so many stories about Kahana, it was just the great ones about Kahana. Rav Kahana entered and lay beneath Rav's bed. Oh, by the way, we've seen similar stories to this in the past when we were dealing with Rabbi Akiva, had to do with bathroom stories about people going in and watching him as he used the bathroom, which I just think are funny, but at the same time also kind of gross. But in this case, it's a similar one. Rav Kahana and entered and lay beneath Rav's bed. So his teacher, he heard Rav chatting and laughing with his wife and seeing to his needs. Right? Now, by the way, chatting and laughing is a euphemism for foreplay. Yes, exactly right. Rav Kahana said to Rav, the mouth of Abba, so Abba is father. So now admittedly, Rav's actual name was Abba Arichta, so it's possible he was just referring to him by his name that others didn't refer to him by, but it's also possible Abba just means father, and maybe he saw him as a father figure to him, unclear. But he says the mouth of Abba is like one whom has never eaten a cooked dish before, right? Meaning it's like he's like ravenous. And no one is saying that every human being is their own human being. No one is, but at the same time, there's obviously something about the rabbis and these great rabbis in which you don't like to think of them as these Don Juan in bed type of guys. Okay, so Rav said to him, Rav said to him, Kahana, you are here, right? He hears, what are you doing down there?
So Kahana spoke. And
Right. Kahana said
from under the bed.
From under the bed, he's like, God, boy, it sounds like you've never eaten a cooked dish before, ever. And he's like, what? Who's talking? Is that you, Kahana? What are you doing down there? Get out of my bedroom. You can imagine the wife just saying, I swear, if you and one more of your students, right? Anyway, leave, Rav said. This is undesirable. You can't do this. This is incorrect behavior. And Kahana said to him, it's Torah and I must learn. In other words, if it's natural, if it's part of the human world, then it's Torah, and I need to learn from my teachers how to be. Anyway, Kahana, right? And you would think that would have ruined their relationship, but it didn't, because, I'll give you one more, and then we get to the kind of the primary story of Kahana. So one more before the primary story. So one more is just how enmeshed he was, in which he was able to interpret those nonverbal or kind of things that weren't explicitly said. He was able to interpret them, and he was able to understand and kind of knew his teacher better than anybody. It says the Gemara relates, this is Shabbat 152a, that Rav Kahana was reading biblical verses before Rav. And by the way, why was he reading biblical verses? Because he was getting really old. He was getting close to death. Not there, but he was just getting old. And when he got to the verse, as the body ages, desire fails, Rav sighed. So he said, right, as the body ages, desire fails, and then his teacher's like, yeah. Right, and you have to assume it's because He used to be such a ladies' man that now he's like, yeah, it's not quite as easy for me to do this as it used to be. And Rav Kahana said, we can derive from this that Rav's desire has ceased. He's not really into the stuff anymore. And who would know better than Rav Kahana, as he was the one who was under his bed in the previous story. Okay, so let's now get to the most famous story of about Rav Kahana, and I've broken it up into like 10 different mini, or however many it is, just as a way of taking it slowly, but also because almost each one of these can kind of stand on its own. But as you can see, I actually took out one little piece, not because there's something problematic, not because I'm showing it to you later, but just because it wasn't really contributing. But it's pretty much straight from all of 117a to the beginning of 117b, but of the tractate called Baba Kama. And this is going to explain why it was that Kahana moved to Israel. And just prior to this, there are a bunch of examples of Jewish informants to the authorities that they were like snitches. And we had a couple of examples of snitches. And then this is the last example of a snitch. And it goes like this. The Gemara relates another incident, meeting all the other three of them prior, and now there's another one. There was a certain man who desired to show another individual's straw to the Gentile authorities who would seize it. In other words, he was going to turn in just, like probably they were corrupt authorities and they were looking for people to, who would say, that one's got a lot of money, that one's got a lot of this, that one's got so that these people could just take it or seize it. And so he came before Rav. He wasn't coming to ask permission to snitch on one of his fellow Jews in Babylonia. Rather, he probably just kind of chanced upon Rav. And he said to them, and rather, or it could have been that people heard about it and they said, go see Rav. I'm not exactly sure. But he came before Rav, who said to him, do not show it and do not show it. Now, you might say, what's that mean? And it's basically them being just emphatic. Do absolutely, under no circumstances, are you to show these authorities which person has this excess stuff so that it can be just taken from them. The man said to him, I will show it, and I will show it, right? So, in other words, I don't care what you say. I'm about to get, have I'm about to have these, the authorities put me in, in their, in good graces. So it benefits me, and I'm going to do it. I don't care what you have to say. Rob?
What is the individual straw? What are they showing?
Oh, so it's like straw. It could actually be straw, which was just maybe valuable, or it could be straw as a euphemism for money, or it's unclear exactly what. But what he was doing,
Okay.
He was turning in his fellow Jew to the authorities, not having done anything illegal, but rather saying, oh, if you're looking for someone rich who's got an abundance of stuff, go, that guy over there has it, right? So Rav Kahana was sitting before Rav, and hearing the man's disrespectful response, he dislodged the man's neck from him. He broke his neck. He killed the guy right on the spot. Whoa. Okay, so now we're going to find out. What I actually took out was Rav's justification for it. That's the part that I didn't leave in, and just because it had nothing to do with Kahana, but rather it was just Rav explaining why he was okay with it. But the point was that it was because if people continue to turn people in, then that's just going to become the new normal around here. Everyone's going to be afraid. Everyone's going to have their property seized from them. The few who are the snitches are going to get a little bit wealthier, but the righteous people or the good people are going to be suffering deeply. And so it's that it was okay to kind of put an end to this pattern. That's what Rav ultimately says. However, the question I put to you guys is, does this seem to you like Kahana is impulsive, or does it seem to you like he's just exceedingly loyal to either his teacher or to the Jewish community? Like, hard to know exactly why he did what he did. Could be a combination of all three. But in any event, Kahana breaks his neck and kills him. So, Rav then said to Rav Kahana, again, what we missed is simply Rav quoting some biblical verse, saying that, it's okay. Anyway, Rav then said to Rav Kahana, Kahana, until now there were rulers who were not particular about bloodshed. But now there are new rulers who are particular about bloodshed. And they will say, murder, murder, and they'll press charges against you. Therefore, get up, ascend Aliyah, make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, to study there under Rabbi Yochanan, and accept upon yourself that you will not raise any difficulties to the statements of Rabbi Yochanan for 7 years. Okay, so at the beginning it makes sense, and then at the end it kind of becomes a little bit more complicated.
Can I suggest?
Go ahead, yeah.
The Rav is countenancing this murder that takes place in front of him.
He's justified, yes.
His concern is only, well, the authorities used to approve of that. It wouldn't have been a problem before.
And now it will.
But now it will be.
Yep.
And here's how you can get away from it. This is an
Aiding and abetting a criminal?
An upstanding rabbi in a faith that theoretically says do not kill.
I agree. It is a problem. For what it's worth, in the lot of reading that I was doing about this, and I did a fair amount, this one person who, I did a fair amount of reading of just people who like to talk about stuff, but then I also read a book having to do with this. When I say a book, like a page or two about, it was referencing, and he was referencing stories that were kind of fanciful but not true. Like, it didn't really happen because there weren't, it wasn't like the Persians. I guess he's referring to the Persians being the first, or unless he was talking about the Parthians, but I think it was the Persians and then maybe some new leadership in Persia, but none of them would be okay with murder like this.
Rulers who were not particular about
right. I mean, and so it's just, yeah. But you're absolutely right. It's very striking. But here's the thing. So it says, get up and go to Eretz Yisrael. In other words, get out of here because they're going to arrest you. And then it says, study under Rabbi Yochanan. It doesn't actually say that, but I put it in there. And accept for yourself, but here's the part which is a little bit complicated, accept for yourself that you will not raise any difficulties to the statements of Rabbi Yochanan for 7 years. So, okay, so first of all, raising a difficulty means if a rabbi is giving a talk about the law, Torah, whatever, and makes some sort of statement like, oh, I'm about to make something up. Oh, a sukkah needs to be no less than 6 feet tall because according to the book of Ecclesiastes, it says, 6 times you shall pick grass. Again, I've just made that up. And Therefore, that rabbi has made a decision that the law is a sukkah shouldn't be less than 6 feet, right? And the difficulty would be a person saying, well, what about the verse from this book which says 8 times you shall, pick grass? That's a difficulty. Meaning, so the one rabbi says this, I can explain this text this way, or I can explain this law using this text. Another person says maybe, but what about this? That's a difficulty. Okay. So he says you don't raise any for 7 years you shouldn't raise any difficulties. Meaning, don't talk for 7 years. Now, why 7 years? Unclear. In what I was reading, what's that?
Statute of limitation. Fly under the radar until the statute of limitations is over.
Well, yeah, okay, so pretty much that was one of the things that I found, which was basically lay low for 7 years. Whether it's statute of limitations or not, it's just stay under the radar for a long time until people just kind of forget about this.
Mhm.
What's the period? What's the period of servitude? Isn't
Say
that
again?
7 years? Period of servitude. Someone is indentured.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. But that kind of connects a little bit with the other thought, or what I was reading about, which is it was Rob's punishment to him. Like, I am forcing you or commanding you or insisting that you not say a single word in this, in Rabbi Yochanan's class for 7 years. Okay, I mean, so either one, I'm not sure which one it is. I was in a couple of different things that I was studying. One suggested that maybe it was laying low, and one was that maybe it was a punishment. Now, so what we're now going to start seeing, which is a fascinating thing, and I think for everyone here should be fascinating, is how, we've never really talked about the kind of the competition or rivalry between what was going on in Israel and what was going on in Babylonia, right? 2 different centers of Jewish life. You had the people who were in Babylonia who stayed there after the exile, never left, built great things, had a great life there, and built schoolhouses and study houses, and Babylonia was, look, the Babylonian Talmud. It's not even, there are 2 Talmuds, and it's the Babylonian Talmud, which is by far the one which is more used, understood, studied. No one studies the Jerusalem Talmud. And the Jerusalem Talmud is much shorter and less detailed, with less stories, and so, right, and so and also, the people of Israel were just barely, making ends meet, and the people in Persia, that was, you're living big in the big cities of Persia. In any event, so that we're going to see here, which is just fascinating too, through the eyes of Kahana, and then also maybe to some degree through the eyes of Yochanan, is the rivalry between these 2 centers of Judaism. So Rav Kahana went to Eretz Yisrael and found Reish Lakish, who was sitting and reviewing Rabbi Yochanan's daily lecture in the Academy for the Rabbis. So Reish Lakish was the best friend of Yochanan. Yochanan discovered Reish. We're going to study this later, but Yochanan discovered Reish Lakish. They were like 2 peas in a pod. They were completely different personalities, completely different types. But in the end, but Reish Lakish was like his primary teaching assistant. There's probably something better. It's just it was like you had Rabbi Yochanan, and then Reish Lakish was the number 2, but Reish Lakish always knew that he had gotten all of his learning from Rabbi Yochanan. In any event, so Kahana, as he's on his way to Israel, he bumps in to this guy, Reish Lakish, who, not Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish himself. And remember that Rav had said to Kahana, don't bring up a single issue with Rabbi Yochanan. He didn't say anything about Reish Lakish. So he sees Reish Lakish reviewing Yochanan's lecture for the rabbis. When he finished, Rav Kahana said to the students, where's Reish Lakish? In other words, Reish Lakish must have hustled out of the schoolhouse kind of fast. And, and Kahana is like, hey, where can I find this guy? They said to him, meaning the students said to him, why do you want to see him? And Kahana said to him, well, I have this difficulty and that difficulty with his review of Yochanan's lecture. In other words, I got all these things that I want to bring up, all these points, these nits that I want to nitpick, and all of these issues to show you that I disagree with you, how you handled it. Again, doesn't mean that what you're saying is wrong. It just means that I think I got something better than what you got. Right? And this resolution and that resolution, in other words, there was an issue, there was something complicated, but here's how you can resolve it. Now remember, he just came to town, right? And he's already saying, I got problems with all your stuff, right? It's like, you really, I cannot believe this is how you do things around here. They told this to Reish Lakish, and he then went and said to Rabbi Yochanan, a lion has ascended from Babylonia, and the master, meaning you, Yochanan, ought to examine the discourse you will be delivering in the academy tomorrow. In other words, we got this guy who has come in and he is ferocious, and he is going to try to stick it to you. And so, don't just come to class unprepared. Prepare. Okay, so what do we learn about Kahana right now?
Quick question.
Yeah,
on
yeah,
language. A lion, is that a commonplace description of a scholar, a great scholar?
No, and it's not. He's not talking about it like a commonplace. He's talking about as like ferocious and kind of and bloodthirsty. He's like saying this guy's he's gonna eat you. That's what he's gonna say, right?
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, no, it's unusual, right? So what are we learning about Kahana? Kahana is arrogant. He's kind of, I don't want to use, vulgar language, but there's some vulgarity. I would call this person a bad guy. Right?
He's a bully.
What?
He's a bully.
He's a bully. Yeah, he's just kind of.
And, and he's a troublemaker.
Yeah, all that. Yep.
And so it's this bully who has to be quiet for 7 years, right?
Correct. 7 years of being quiet. Just to Yochanan, as we could see. So the next day, they seated Rav Kahana in the first row in front of Yochanan. In other words, clearly this guy came from Babylonia, clearly, based upon what Reish Lakish had explained to Yochanan, he knew his stuff. So they put him in the front row, right? So in front of Rabbi Yochanan. So I guess what we're also doing is we're getting a little peek as to kind of how these yeshivas, these schoolhouses work, that there were a bunch of rows, and the closer you were was the more honored and, important position. The further back you were, you were less esteemed. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan stated a halakha, a law, and Rav Kahana did not raise a difficulty. And of course, Rabbi Yochanan was expecting him to do so. Certainly, Reish Lakish, who was there at the time, was expecting him to do that also, but he didn't say anything. And why? because of what he was told, 7 years. Rabbi Yochanan stated another halakha, and again, Rav Kahana did not raise a difficulty. As a result, they placed Rav Kahana back by 1 row. In other words, silence demoted the person from the front row. Right? Does this make sense? So, and which, by the way, is kind of ridiculous because, you'd think that when you stay silent, it's just kind of out of respect. It doesn't mean that you don't know. It just means that you've chosen not to speak up. And so, and all the reason is because that they gave him this high esteem just because they knew that he was a smart guy, and Reish Lakish had explained that this guy really kind of knew what he was talking about and put me in my place, and he's going to do the same to you, so let's put him in the front row. But he didn't say anything, so they moved him back a row. This occurred until he had been moved back 7 rows, until he was seated in the last row. Rabbi Yochanan said to Shimon ben Lakish, and that is the same as Reish Lakish, the lion you mentioned has become a fox. That guy is not what you said he was. Now, obviously, again, silence being a reason for demotion is bizarre, but it's what he had. But meanwhile, Yochanan is now saying, you were wrong. He doesn't know anything. It's all good. I knew I didn't have to study for this class, for what I was teaching today. This is all a big false alarm. Now, by the way, obviously not lost on us is 7 years, and he was demoted 7 rows. So already they are making a statement in the Talmud to connect those 2 numbers and those 2 events or things. So then the story continues. Rav Kahana said to himself, may it be God's will that these 7 rows I have moved should replace the 7 years that Rav told me to wait before raising difficulties to the statements of Rabbi Yochanan. So kind of what I just mentioned. And remember that, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the subtext to this is also that rivalry between Babylonia and Israel, right? He is, and of course, the authors of this are all Babylonians. This is the Babylonian Talmud. The authors are Babylonians. So, presumably the story is communicating that the Rabbi Yochanan from Israel is offering this great lecture, and there's nothing that, and therefore he is besting this other guy Kahana, and there is in round 1 the win goes to Israel, right? Right. So, but round 2 begins. He stood up on his feet and said to Rabbi Yochanan, let the master go back to the beginning of his discourse and repeat what he said. So Rabbi Yochanan stated a halakha, and Rav Kahana raised a difficulty. Oh, and by the way, back to the question when we had before about was the 7 years about a punishment or laying low? Well, this kind of suggests that maybe it was a punishment, right? Because he said, I was just debased 7 times. Let each one of those times make up for a year. If it was, I need you to lay low because you got to be safe, then it would have not been reflected in that, in the fact that he, the 7 times, he would have been like, I got to stay quiet because it's in my best interest. But in this case, he's saying I have to stay quiet because I was kind of told to stay quiet. But I think as a punishment, but I think now that I've been embarrassed by 7 rows, let each one of those rows kind of be equal to a year. So he stated a halakha, and Rav Kahana raised a difficulty. Therefore, they placed him in the first row again, and again, Rav Yochanan stated a halakha, and again, he raised a difficulty. So this guy who had kept silent for one day,
Yeah. Why is he doing it now?
because he's so arrogant.
Ah,
Yeah, he can't stop himself. So, and also because the Babylonian Talmud is using him as a way of showing that they are superior to the rabbis of Israel. Rabbi Yochanan was sitting upon 7 cushions, not felt cloths, cushions this time, so that he could be seen by all of his students, right? He's sitting there, all sitting in the same area, but he wants to just kind of be raised a little bit, so he's on 7 cushions. And since he could not answer Rav Kahana's questions, he removed 1 cushion from under himself to demonstrate that he was lowering himself out of respect for Rav Kahana. Which, by the way, I assume you would all agree is he is lowering himself out of respect for Kahana, but, and maybe he's out of respect for Kahana's his knowledge and scholarship, but certainly not out of respect for Kahana's menschlichkeit or appropriate behavior, right? Yeah.
By raising a difficulty,
Yeah.
it's criticism. So he's criticizing.
He's saying, really? That's the case? Let me explain to you. If you're so sure, you're so sure about that, well, why don't you, well, doesn't this, what I'm about to tell you, contradict what you're about to say?
But Yohanan doesn't argue and said, no,
Right?
listen to what I just said.
No, he basically says, it's basically point, counterpoint, but it doesn't come with another counterpoint to that, right? Or at least here. And why? Again, if this were another text, very likely Yochanan would have, but this is like this text which is doing this comparison between Babylonia and Israel. So he said another halakha, and Kahana raised another difficulty, and this happened repeatedly until Yochanan removed all the cushions from underneath himself until he was sitting on the ground. And it's, and this is kind of a hard, little section to read, because you're watching the single greatest rabbi of the time in Israel, Yochanan, being just kind of embarrassed and humiliated by Kahana. And Kahana is showing no respect. The same guy who broke another person's neck because he wasn't being respectful of his teacher is showing the very same type of arrogance to Yochanan. But again, it's more because this text has purpose in terms of that competition between Babylonia and Israel. So he's sitting on the ground. So he lowered himself all the way until he was sitting on the ground. Now, Rabbi Yochanan was an old man, and his eyebrows drooped over his eyes. I think with that, I was trying to understand that. Is it either he's got so much hair in his eyebrows that it just kind of covers his eyes, is what I think it is. I had a teacher when I was in seminary who was my music teacher. And he's kind of like the famous music teacher. Anyway, but his eyebrows were so long that we used to joke that his eyebrows entered the room about 15 to 20 minutes before he entered the room. I mean, so much. Anyway, Yochanan was an old man, his eyebrows drooped over his eyes. So he said to his students, uncover my eyes for me. In other words, can someone help me and brush my eyebrows back so I can see Rav Kahana? So they uncovered his eyes from him with a silver eye brush. Okay.
That's pretty cool. A silver eye brush.
Yeah. Right. It's not just he's got a silver hairbrush and a silver eye brush. He also has one for his nose hairs, one for his ear hairs too. Okay. So once his eyes were uncovered, Rabbi Yochanan saw that Rav Kahana's lips were split. And he thought rather, that Rav Kahana was smirking at him. And by the way, at this point, I think it was a pretty reasonable assumption. I mean, he had just kind of like embarrassed him over and over again. And now after a full, I'd said round 1 went to Yochanan and Israel, but then rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 went to Kahana. And Kahana was like standing over him like Muhammad Ali was standing over Joe Frazier and basically smirking.
He schooled him, if you will.
Yes, completely. And he says,
He's
What-
totally abased, disrespected,
Right.
really
not
adored.
expected the greatest of that generation. Okay, so as a result, Rabbi Yochanan was offended, and Rav Kahana died as punishment for the fact that he offended Rabbi Yochanan. Now, again, it's not saying that Yochanan killed him, but it's almost like saying like the cosmos killed him because they kind of were in touch with Yochanan's feelings of anger or offense or insult, and so he just kind of the cosmos killed him at that moment. Again, if you push me on this, it's gonna be a little complicated. I can't really explain to you no one did what we know is Yochanan didn't do the killing, but Yochanan did the killing because he was offended, and the killing was as a result of him being offended. In any event.
It's justice being served.
Yes. So the next day, Rabbi Yochanan said to the rabbis, his students, "Did you see how that Babylonian behaved in such a disrespectful manner?" They said to him, "His usual manner of appearance is such," right? He kind of always looks like that. He wasn't really smirking at you. He just kind of has his mouth is split open like that. He wasn't mocking you. Hearing this, Rabbi Yochanan went up to Rav Kahana's burial cave and saw that it was encircled by a serpent, right? Who had placed its tail in its mouth, completely encircling the cave and blocking the entrance. All right, so meaning there's this big, not just like almost like a big anaconda. It's like blocking the whole entrance. Rabbi Yochanan said to it, "Serpent, serpent, open your mouth and allow the teacher to enter and be near the disciple." Right? But the serpent did not open its mouth to allow him entry. He then said, "Okay, fine, let me change what I ask. Allow a colleague to enter and near his colleague." In other words, first he said, "Let me, the master, go and see my student." But the serpent didn't let him. And he goes, "All right, fine. Let 2 people on equal footing see each other." And again, the serpent did not open its mouth. Finally, Rabbi Yochanan said, "Okay, allow the disciple to enter and be near the teacher," saying that Kahana was the teacher and he was the disciple, which is now completely demoting himself and embarrassing himself and lessening himself for everybody, and most specifically for the readers of the Talmud. Right? The snake then opened its mouth for him to allow him entry, and Yochanan requested divine mercy from God and raised Rav Kahana from the dead. So, okay, he raised him from the dead. We know that's not possible, but let's put that aside for a minute. The bigger point, of course, being that we now have Yochanan himself admitting that he is not equal, not just to the great rabbis over there in Babylonia, but to the students of the great rabbis in Babylonia. Right? I mean, it's a very strong statement. Wow, right? It's big. So Yochanan says to Kahana, "Had I known that this was the master's manner of appearance, that grin that you gave, I wouldn't have been offended. So let the master come with me." In other words, now Yochanan is calling him master. It's hard to read because it's arrogant, and it's also being written by the Babylonians, and so therefore they're not giving him a fair. I was about to say something contemporary and political, and I'm not going to. In any event, so suffice it to say that it's lies being written about him. But okay. Now let the master come with me to the study hall. So Rav Kahana said to him, if you're able to request divine mercy so that I will not die again, I will go with you. And if not, I will not go with you. And the Gemara comments, since the time decreed for his death had passed, it had passed, meaning that he was safe. In other words, basically, Yochanan had managed to get what he wanted, which was, no, he wasn't going to be killed again. Now, the story ends, one more paragraph, one more little section. The story ends. Rabbi Yochanan then completely awakened him, so he was like brought back to life, but he was weak, and now Yochanan really brought him back up, stood him up. Thereafter, he asked him about every uncertainty that he had. Like now, Yochanan is just basically asking Kahana about everything, and Rav Kahana resolved each of them for him. Right? In other words, this just showed that Kahana was the master, and now it's Yochanan asking questions of the great master as opposed to the other way around. And this is the background to that which Rabbi Yochanan says to his students on several occasions. What I said was yours is in fact theirs. Meaning, I thought that Torah scholars in Eretz Yisrael were the most advanced, but in fact, it's the scholars of Babylonia that are most advanced, right? So basically, the Babylonians who wrote this are just confirming their own superiority to the rabbis of Israel.
Can I ask a question about who raised Rav Kahana from the dead? And two above, it says Rabbi Yochanan
Yochanan did with his prayers or with his incantations.
raised. Okay.
All right, so we're already 5 minutes over, but all right, so let's see, there's two more. All right, we can do it really quickly because so the rest of them aren't as good, but I just put them in there anyway. So one has to do with the first one from Kiddushin shows that he was poor. This one kind of suggests that he's honorable. Well, I'm not, that's a question, but and it also kind of shows how special he is, that he has connections with Elijah, and in fact, as in Elijah the prophet. And so it says, the Gemara relates Rav Kahana would sell baskets woven from palm leaves to women. He was enticed by a certain noblewoman to engage in sex with her. He said to her, let me go and adorn myself first. In other words, let me just take a shower and get all fepitzed first. And he went up to the top of the roof and fell from the roof towards the ground. He threw himself off the roof. Elijah the prophet came and caught him in the way that Superman catches Lois Lane. Elijah said to Rav Kahana, you've troubled me to travel 400 parsangs, 400 miles to save you. Rav Kahana said, what caused me to be in this situation of temptation? Was it not poverty? As I'm forced to engage in a trade that leads me to come into contact with women. And at that moment, Elijah gave him a basket full of dinars to spare him from having to work as a salesman. Obviously, completely fanciful.
So, rather than touch a woman, he'll throw himself off a roof?
Yes.
Or a woman that's not his wife? Correct.
And, oh, by the way, maybe this is in there because they want to, he's kind of an arrogant, kind of little, again, I've been trying to avoid using vulgar
Excuse
words.
me, the word putz comes to mind.
Fine, putz, that's a good one. Others, and they're just trying to, maybe the writers of the Talmud are trying to, rehabilitate his personality image just a little bit. Last one, by the way, and the reason why I give you this one is to say that we know that he actually returned from Israel at some point and moved back to Babylonia. And the reason why we know this, well, who knows? There's various different reasons, but the way the Talmud explains it is because from this story, the Gemara states, for jaundice, so we're about to get the Talmud explaining to us medical treatments. For jaundice, one should drink 2 of the 3 ingredients mentioned together with beer, and one becomes sterile or clean from it. The Gemara continues to discuss this remedy, and if one does not have these ingredients, and those were Alexandrian gum, saffron, or alum, or if the remedy didn't work, let one bring the head of a salted shabuta fish and boil it in beer and drink it. It's like old wives' tales about, oh, you got a stomach ache? Then what you need to do is take 2 spoonfuls of vinegar, add 3 dashes of paprika to it, stick, and put, you get the point, right? And if this is not effective, let one bring grasshopper brine and drink it. And if one doesn't have grasshopper brine, let one bring brine of small birds and enter the bathhouse and smear himself with it. And if there is no bathhouse, have him stand between the oven and the wall. You know why? It's like a steam room or a sauna. It'll sweat it out. Rav Yochanan said, one who seeks to heat this patient up, simply needs to wrap him tightly in a sheet. Now, Rav Aha bar Yosef, and that's, by the way, how we know, because Rav Aha bar Yosef was from Babylonia, was sick with this disease, and Rav Kahana performed this remedy for him, and he was healed. So, but there's 2 things, the reasons why I wanted to include that. The first is to show that he did, well, this is one of the ways we know that he returned to Babylonia. But the second is, and maybe more important, is what is that last part? It suggests that Kahana learned from Yochanan, right? So now they're only referring not to a legal, to a halakha, but rather this is just some sort of medical treatment about how do you get someone to sweat something out if they're sick. But the point though is that in the other parts, like this is like sneaky because it might actually give us a little eye into maybe the reality, because it's like the winners write the textbooks, they're writing their own textbook, and they're talking about how Babylonia is superior to Israel. But look what got snuck in accidentally, because they're really just talking about medical remedies. But what they're saying is, oh, no, Kahana learned this from Yochanan, meaning that he was learning from Yochanan all along, but they just weren't giving him credit for it. And this one was like benign because it had to do with medicine or medical, remedies, but there's a bigger kind of piece to this, which is, no, he was learning from Yochanan. They just weren't crediting Yochanan with teaching him, right? It's kind of just like by the way, but a interesting thing. But no question that the victors wrote the textbooks, and they claimed that Babylonia was far superior.
But along those lines, they put up Rav Kahana, and he's a jerk.
Right. He's arrogant, but you know what? The fact is that because they didn't see that stuff as being arrogant and being a jerk. We do, because we know it's just inappropriate, lame behavior. But for them, they were just showing about how just far superior he was to these nincompoops in Israel. He could just, of course, he was offering a problem for every single thing that they had to say, because there were so many issues to bring up. I agree with you.
Well, I mean, like he stayed under his teacher's bed uninvited.
He was a student back then, but
Yeah,
still.
and then he murdered somebody.
For good reasons. Again, don't shoot the messenger, but yeah, like, according to them, for good reasons, and all this kind of stuff. It's just kind of interesting, but and so my opinion, he was a prick. That's my opinion. But
Sounds like it.
yes, that's my opinion. But the authors of the Talmud at the time were not trying to show that he was that. They were trying to show that he was just so exceptional.
So you said he went
Well,
back
isn't Yohanan?
At the end
to
of his life.
Babylonia
Yeah, at the end of his life.
to see the Rav, or? had
No, the Rav
passed
died
by
at
then?
that. Rav's dead
So
at
there
that
was
point.
no, okay.
Yeah, Rav's dead at that
Isn't
point.
isn't Yohanan somewhat of a heroic figure though, because he abases himself to get this wisdom transmitted to Jerusalem? He's
Wait, hold
willing
on.
to do.
Yochanan, I'm not sure. He abases himself to get this wisdom to. Oh, you mean that he abases himself because presumably he is now accessing all of the wisdom of Babylonia and allowing it to enter into Israel.
Yeah, he's sort of becoming a conduit, and because no one will listen to an arrogant prick,
Yes.
but they will listen to him. And so if he's like a conduit, that wisdom does come into Israel without everybody clubbing this guy over the head.
Yeah,
So hard to live with.
that's very interesting, and that's a really worthy contribution. I would say that if this story were true exactly as is, then that would be what you're saying is entirely correct. But I would say that this is completely fanciful. So many of these things are beyond the pale of our belief. The killing, the coming back to bringing someone back to life again, the great Rabbi Yochanan being unable to answer, to kind of even be like a legitimate jousting partner with him, but just completely, Kahana superior to Yochanan. Yochanan admitting it himself and then saying to his own students that what you thought was yours is actually, like all of these things lead to, the whole thing about being sent back 7 rows, just because you were, everything about this story, it doesn't feel, as I've always said, that even if a story isn't altogether true, it is a reflection of what at least they thought of these people in some way, and so it may not be true, but they did believe Kahana was this great kind of scholar in Babylonia who was forced to go to Israel. Why he was forced, unclear. Did he actually kill someone? Who knows? But they certainly want to talk about him and lionize him, and I say lionize him because he was referred to as a lion. No, but extol him and aggrandize him for being, and they want to communicate that in this text. And so, again, what do we learn about this? Hard to know. What I will say, if there's the best thing we learn from all this is that is that we'd like to think that these two centers of scholarship, let's call it Tiberias and Sippori, the Galilee of Israel, being one center of scholarship, and the Euphrates region with Sura and Pampadiya and Nehardia, and that being another center of Jewish scholarship, that we'd like to think that they did their best to work well together, and it's very possible that they did, but this text kind of lets out some secrets about how there was more competition or more of a rivalry than we give credit to. What's that?
Is it indicative that Kahana came back to Babylon and told these stories?
Right, because he couldn't handle being with these primitive people in Israel. But what would give validation to the statement that they did get along well is that the 2 Talmuds were written. Again, the Jerusalem Talmud is the weak sister compared to the Babylonian Talmud. for sure, on a lot of different levels. But they don't contradict each other. They don't, they tell a lot of the same stories or talk about a lot of the same laws, which means not that they were intuitive or that the rabbis in both places had the same ideas, but rather that they were working in collaboration with each other. And so there was a connection between these two centers of Jewish civilization or Jewish scholarship. But even if there was collaboration, it's entirely possible that one would say, yeah, but we're carrying 75% of the, we're doing the heavy lifting and we're letting you ride our coattails over here. And that could be what this is really trying to say. Maybe it was their way of saying, yeah, you have yours, we have ours, they're the same, or it's not the same, but similar. They've got similarities, there's no contradictions. But we gave you way more than you gave us. Maybe it's what it's saying. All right. So we went 20 minutes over, a record, but it was fun anyway. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you next week.
Nice to see you guys and us.
Good night.
I think I know for next week for sure. Take
Well,
care.
See you next when we see you again next time.
And that fanciful quality makes it fun, though. That's